Hawaii's economy continues to suffer during the coronavirus pandemic, and while many businesses are reopening with guidelines in place, some say moving too quickly could set off an increase in COVID-19 cases. So how should the state safely move towards a new normal? Join the conversation with Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, House Speaker Scott Saiki, an infectious disease expert, and the Hawaiʻi Restaurant Association. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Many stores, beaches, and parks have reopened, which seems like a clear signal that it's safe to go out again. And at the same time, many are still being told to continue to work at home for another month. Health officials say there is a chance for a second wave of infections as business activity and personal interactions increase, making it even more important that we take extra precautions when we leave our homes. So how safe is safe? Our panel tonight includes the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the State House, an infectious disease specialist, and the owner of several fast food restaurants. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Joining me in the studio is Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, who serves as the state's liaison to the healthcare community. Dr. Elaine Bello is an infectious disease specialist. She works with several hospitals and has been in practice for more than 20 years. And Victor Lim, who owns several McDonald's restaurants on Oahu. The restaurant industry is among those hardest hit by government shutdowns in the wake of the coronavirus. And joining us via the internet is Speaker of the House, Scott Saiki, who represents McCully, Kaka'ako, and downtown Honolulu. He founded and co-chairs the House Select Committee on COVID-19. Let me start with you, Dr. Bello. How do you feel that we're doing in terms of responding to the coronavirus? Do you feel that we should feel safer in the community now? It seems like the numbers are quite low.
Yes, so I think we're probably at the lowest prevalence that we've been since it started statewide. As of yesterday, there were 0 cases, but then again, rapidly, 3 have been just diagnosed. So there's still this low-level transmission going on, but we're in a way better situation than we were a month ago. So I think, if we're going to relax anything, now is the time, but it has to be done in a very careful, measured way with continued close monitoring of new cases, widespread testing for those who are symptomatic, and really aggressive contact tracing. And for those who are found to be positive, you have to still put them into isolation.
Lieutenant Governor Green, what's your read on the situation right now? I mean, it strikes me that there's so few cases that I still don't know why we can't just relax already.
Well, it's hard to relax when the whole world is hit by a pandemic, of course, so that's a psychological concern. But I would totally agree with Dr. Bello. We are at the lowest point. Some people like to use the word viral load, but yes, the prevalence of cases is very low. Over the last 2 weeks, we haven't had any fatalities. Over the last 14 days, only 20 some odd cases. So it's a very low number, and we've been testing pretty rigorously. We're over 40,000 tests now in the state. So I do feel comfortable. I think it was appropriate to relax some of our restrictions on gathering because it's not just about the virus any longer. We also know it's about the economy and people's psychological well-being. We've seen other health problems, which I'm sure we'll talk about, like depression and suicide and feelings of desperation in general. So you have to balance our total safety and health, which is what we've been doing, versus these other things. And that's why over the next 10 days, you're going to see a pretty vast reopening of society.
Speaker Saiki, you were the co-chair of a special committee that looks specifically ahead at what the economy is doing. How comfortable are you? Today, the mayor announced that churches could open this weekend. Restaurants are going to open fairly soon. The beaches are open. How comfortable are you with the pace of how things are opening up?
Well, I'm just really appreciative of the general public complying with the governor's shutdown order, as well as the quarantine order. I think that those two directives made a very direct impact on Hawaii. as we reopen, I saw a survey about a week ago where 80% of the public was still very concerned about health and safety and was reluctant to reopen the economy. I think that if we do this, it has to be done incrementally. We have to ensure that all of the public health safeguards are in place before we start to make some drastic decisions.
Victor Lim, with the Restaurant Association and McDonald's franchise owner, how frustrating has this been for you, and are you chomping at the bit to sort of get back at business? I know for you and I have spoken before. You covered your employees for the time that they were out, and then you got a PPP loan. But you're one of the lucky ones, right? Compared to
No, I think the second PPP loan, I think a lot of people that didn't get it on the first round got it on the second round. The frustration part is that many of the business people, when we look at the statistics, our state is probably one of the best in the country, and seeing and knowing that, and yet we've been kind of, maybe from our perspective, are we a little bit too cautious because my fellow business people are dying. There's no revenue for the last 2 months. And many of the small businesses, usually they take a sales of today to pay yesterday's bill. And now there's no sales coming in, and we still got bills to pay. So that is creating a lot of stress for a lot of people.
Do you feel like businesses are smart enough and cautious enough to be willing to take the methodical steps that it takes to actually keep the restaurant clean, to keep the people apart? Do you think that most restaurant owners are going to be that responsible about that?
I think the hard part for a lot of the, I'm an exception, I've been at it for a long time, but for a lot of people, they don't have as good a planning or resources to be able to do what they need to do. I look at it from day one that I do not want to let my people go. I want to keep them. I want to, keep them on payroll. I want to make sure that they get their insurance. They didn't lose that. And then when the PPP thing came up, I said, wow, that's God said, it's something that at least will tide me over, because it was just like yesterday where our unemployment rate is one of the lowest in the country, and we couldn't find people.
Yeah, so we'll come back to those supports and what's coming back. But Dr. Bello, I'd really like to know what your opinion is. It struck me like today the mayor announced the churches this weekend, and I think Mayor Kaukami on Kauai also announced that. Does that make you a little nervous?
Yeah, that does make me a little nervous. So I think that if churches are going to open up, they have to follow some pretty strict guidelines about social distancing. There are a number of outbreaks associated with church gatherings.
On the mainland?
Internationally, as in Korea. There's the famous one in Korea. And in the CDC weekly morbidity and mortality report, there was just a cluster described in an Arkansas church. So definitely churches as congregate settings, if you don't practice those things. So I don't know if there was any, if there's any stipulations that come with the opening up of churches, because I think with the usual church worship setting, people are sitting close to each other. In Episcopal Catholic churches, they share communion things. All of those things are going to have to be modified for churches to open up safely.
Yeah, my understanding is, and I talked to a couple of folks from church leadership today, the rules are you still have to maintain the 6-foot social distance, so they have to figure out a way to minimize the number of people that show up at church. And there was a concern that the word comes out that, boom, the churches are open and people are just going to flock to the churches, and then they'll be told, no, I can only get 50 people in here, or only got 60 people in here.
So the flocking, I don't know, I think someone already mentioned, I think the general public is still fearful of coming outside. You'll see pictures of people at the beaches, But I think a lot of my patients, they haven't even wanted to come into the office yet because they're waiting for the word from the state to say it's okay. So I think
Josh Green, I mean, we've got Memorial Day weekend coming up. The beaches are going to be open. Last weekend, the beaches were packed.
Yes.
The malls are open. More businesses are open. I mean, what's your read on the situation? Do you get a little nervous?
No, I don't get nervous, actually. I think that we've been pretty analytical. I definitely echo the concerns from a health standpoint about congregation, but I don't get worried. Churches, I met with many of the leaders of the largest churches to prepare them and for them to prepare me with their plans, so they understand that they have to have the family units can be close like we are at home, but they have to be very cognizant of having space between family units from one to another. I don't worry about the beaches because beaches are a pretty low risk area as long as people are semi-smart and are still socially distancing. There's a lot of heat there, and that does help on the beaches to our knowledge. Look, I'm a Jewish guy married to a nice Mormon girl. Religion makes me nervous a lot of the time, but I will tell you that people need the churches now, and it was going to be difficult to open restaurants where people are going to be congregating and not churches. So this speaks back to Dr. Bello's initial point, which is by having a very low prevalence, it gives us the opportunity to do this. Now, if we do see a surge, we will know very quickly to hit the pause button. But I don't think that we're going to have to worry about a large surge until the big changes happen, which is people coming into Hawaii.
Speaker Saiki, I'm wondering if, from your research that you folks did on your committee, do you feel like we have the ability to spot and identify a problem area in time to back off and actually reduce the activity out there? Is there really a political will out there to back off once people have been out?
Yeah, so when we started our committee about 6 weeks ago, the statistics have changed for the better. When we started off, the Department of Health told our committee that they had testing capacity for about 2,000 people per day. Today, the health department tells us they have capacity for 5,000 tests per day. There are 30 contact tracers on staff at the health department when we started our committee. Today, there is a program in place to work with the School of Medicine and the nursing school at the University of Hawaii to train contact tracers, and the capacity there is probably 200 or 300 contact tracers. So there's been a lot of progress just in the past 6 weeks in terms of developing capacity. It's probably still not enough capacity, but I think we've made some good strides.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions along those lines about keeping track of the virus in the community. How is our Department of Health identifying asymptomatic residents among us in the local community? And what does our State Department of Health advise our, well, I won't go to nursing homes yet, we'll do that later. But how do you identify asymptomatic people? And why don't we get some trained dogs to smell this out? That's actually a real thing, apparently. So where is our situation? You mentioned you'd like to see more testing available, right?
So I think the testing is pretty available now. I think you have to be smart on who you test. So we've started at Queens doing our elective surgeries have started again, which were really shut down about a month ago. So as part of the opening up of elective surgeries, we are screening asymptomatic people before they get elective surgery. So we're actually looking at what the prevalence is in that population. So we're doing nasopharyngeal testing. We just completed, actually, on Tuesday, a prevalence study within our hospital of all admitted patients. And actually, we had 0 test positive. So we were very happy about that.
All your patients or all your staff?
Patients.
So and how many people were tested?
So I had what our census was at that time, whatever our census was. So our census were, usually about 500. We've been down about 70 to 80% of our usual census. And so we tested everybody, who on that particular day who did not have a already test within the week. But we're expecting a low prevalence, but we didn't think it was zero.
Zero,
But
and
was
that's
zero.
the diagnostic test, not the antibody
The
test.
diagnostic test. And we have in our investigational review board a research project where we are going to offer the antibody test to all of our employees. And we're going to start a cohort study where we ask our employees if they're interested, which will be both the combination of the antibody test and the antigen test simultaneously. And we plan to follow them out 18 months.
That's quite an interesting study, right? What do you think of what she just said, Josh?
I think it kicks butt. I think that Queens and Hawaii Pacific Health and some of our other hospital leaders are very important, not just in their care of our people, and we've had the lowest mortality rate in the nation, which is testament to their hard work. But this kind of research is necessary because we need to get a background idea of where we are in the state now before we open up our borders, and hopefully very carefully, to tourists. We need to know, number one, how well we've done to keep the virus suppressed, but we also need to know how vulnerable are we? Because if we don't have many cases, of course, we won't have much immunity. And so that is going to be very important. When Hawaii Pacific Health did their sample of a couple thousand people, they found, I think it was 0.5%, about 1 out of 200 people tested positive for antibodies. This Queens data, very valuable. Department of Health is beginning some similar processes and studies. So we'll know where we are now, and then we will know, hopefully, if we continue to do this work, where we are, say, mid-July, mid-August, once we do have some tourism resuming. That will guide us in a great way. It will give us capacity to know where to beef up our defenses.
Let me ask Victor Lim. You're associated with many other restaurants, including you're quite familiar with the McDonald's where there was a spike. There was a cluster with another McDonald's, one in Kona,
Yes. Not
not yours here. As a restaurant owner, do you feel like you should have access to more testing for your employees, or just to kind of keep a baseline that everybody's okay? Did that make you feel like I want to get my employees tested or other people's employees tested?
I think this disease is so new, and we know that all the healthcare providers are scrambling just to get the tests necessary for the critical people. We probably will stand in queue in the back, but when the time comes, because I travel a lot, I want to make sure that I have some kind of antibody in my body. I might have, I don't know, because I do a lot of overseas travel as well as on the mainland. But it's something that you're good to know. So I don't think we are on the first tier of people that needs those tests first. And the hard part is that it's a luck of the draw as somebody showed up with the disease, and then you got to go figure out what you need to do.
Speaker Saiki, did the legislature in this last session, today was the last day of your session, did you folks provide significant resources for testing and contact tracing and so on?
Yes, we did. So one of the larger items that we approved today was a $36 million appropriation for scanning thermal scanners at the airports. So obviously the airport is a critical player during this pandemic, and it needs to have the infrastructure to screen travelers. The $36 million will go towards machines at all of the airports. It will not only test for temperatures, but also take photos of people who are traveling through the airports. We've also as a part of our CARES federal funding, we set aside $174 million out of the state's share to the 3 neighbor island counties. And the reason why we wanted to do that was to give them the ability to provide screening and testing services as well. So we expect that the neighbor island counties, like the city and county of Honolulu, will provide more screening and testing.
I've got a lot more questions about testing, and then I've got a lot of questions about tourism. So I'm kind of having this show laid out for us here. Question, is there systematic testing being done at prisons, care home, and public housing? What are, Lieutenant Governor, as you start rolling out these larger and larger testing programs, and I think while the state still wants to test asymptomatic people, they've also added to the list of places. Where's our next tier of testing? Who's going to be getting tested next, even if they are asymptomatic?
Well, there's lots of need there. Our institutions, like institutions all across the country, have to be given special attention because we know what the consequence would be, for instance, if there was an outbreak in a nursing home. So there is a mandate from the federal government to test people very widely, keeping in mind a test is just a moment in time, but it's also helpful and instructive that you find one or two individuals in an institution, say at a nursing home, so that they then can be kept very safe, because if you see a big outbreak, it could kill a lot of people. We have not had any cases, to our knowledge or to my knowledge, at the prisons. My team went and delivered 6,000 masks just out of general concern as a person to the prison. But we've been a little lucky. We've also been quite careful. And as Speaker Saiki said early, the initial orders to keep people in lockdown at home had a profound effect on decreasing spread. Now, going forward, the big testing question is really going to be, the elephant in the room is how much contact tracing, how much testing are you able to do responsibly as you have the rest of the world begin to consider coming to Hawaii. And, I have strong feelings about that. I'm sure we'll talk about that during the show. My feeling is do all that we can to get people tested, if possible, before they come. It's not perfect, but it will greatly decrease our risk, and then have capacity here to test very widely, as Speaker Saiki was saying, because we shouldn't let down our guard. We can be the best state in the country, and we also can't afford to have a big surge because we have pretty limited healthcare capacity overall.
Let me just ask a question on that. Is that pretty much 99.99% of the people are here that
Right
are
now.
going to be here for a little while?
Yes.
We're not going to have a whole lot of introduction of new people. From what Dr. Bello described, they tested every patient in Queens and none of them had it.
Right.
They did antibody testing at Hawaii Pacific Health, and there was a very small number of people
16,
that were even approached to may have had it. So it doesn't feel like it's very prevalent, like we don't really have a lot of threat of major local spread here. Is that a safe thing to say?
Well, I think that's right now. We don't have diseases, but the fact that everybody's negative means that we're wide open, vulnerable. So at the minute they let travelers back in, so pretty much every place in the country except for Montana has a higher prevalence than us. So anybody coming from any other place, any other state besides Montana is going to have a higher prevalence and potential to bring it into our state.
Let me ask, Doctor, what do you think, where do you think the next regimes of tests should go?
Well, I think, again, I would be very interested in testing the travel industry because, again, as we let people back in, they're the front line. They're almost like they're the healthcare providers for the tourists. So I would like to know what their exposure risk is. And I think it's always been odd that we did not have more cases earlier on. Our proximity to Asia, we still don't understand that. Why were we not harder hit earlier on? So they're a very interesting population to study.
It really is the $1 million question because, as you can imagine,
$1 billion question.
Well, it's a multi-billion-dollar question, and there's going to be he's McDonald's has done $1 trillion, but the travelers out on the mainland, there is a very large pent-up demand to come to Hawaii, and we have no choice but to keep our viral load low in our state. We have no choice because we have to open the economy. It's going to have to happen on some level, but we cannot allow a big surge of COVID again, because if we do, we'll have to shut it down, and that would be catastrophic. So therefore, it leaves us with one option and one option only, in my opinion, and that is to have multiple layers of protection for people coming in. But I do think that has to include some testing protocol coming into the state, because if you don't do that, you'll never know for sure that people are negative. You'll know they don't have a fever at that moment, which is good. And the scanners, I'm a big supporter of that kind of thing, so I appreciate Speaker Saiki saying that. But if we don't have the capacity to test people as they're coming in, every extra increment of COVID that goes up is going to be blamed on tourists. That's going to create a very negative climate for our tourist economy, and also it can very quickly overwhelm our healthcare system. So I think we need to get less uptight about testing people and just do the hard work of doing that, because it will pay dividends in the end.
Let me ask this question. A couple of not even a couple, about a half a dozen people have said, when are we going to lift the 14-day quarantine on inter-island travelers?
I think it's going to be about June 1st. I can tell you we did talk about that a little bit today with the governor. I don't commit him or the Attorney General or General Hara to a date, but they're looking at the forms right now. They have very comprehensive processes they want to have enacted for inter-island travel in advance of travel from the mainland. But this is kind of a good dry run. And then in just a few days, we'll have much more capability to have inter-island travel. I right now have no personal worry about inter-island travel because we've had so few cases with the low prevalence in each of the different counties. We're not really putting each other at risk. So if I'd had my way, I would have opened it yesterday, honestly. But having the right processes in place will help us going forward. Also, quarantining people if they've traveled from Kona to Oahu or vice versa, it's just not really doing anything right now, in my opinion.
Speaker Saiki, inter-island travel, what's your feeling about how quickly that could go up?
Yes, so I feel that it's really important that the public begin to develop some confidence when it comes to travel. And so logically, we really need to begin with inter-island travel. We need to have residents feel that it is safe to be on a plane and to fly to a different island, and not to be exposed to the virus. The other thing I wanted to say was that just kind of a reminder is that initially the majority of the positive cases in Hawaii were from Hawaii residents who had traveled to other states or to other destinations like Las Vegas and Seattle and came home and tested positive. So it wasn't necessarily that the positive cases were from tourists.
That's a really interesting point, and I'd like to ask Dr. Bello about this. We're learning more about the transmission of this virus. I think today there was a study out that said there's very few cases where they've documented people maybe getting it off of a surface. We spend all this energy wiping down surfaces, but
that came out yesterday.
Yeah, you're watching that at the restaurant, right? And it also seems that most of the transmissions that we've seen here have been within families or close coworkers. For yourself, are you pretty confident that you can keep yourself safe? Like if you were traveling or out and about?
Yeah, so I don't know. I have no plans to travel anytime soon. But I think respiratory transmission still is the most important route. So simply the use of barrier masks, they don't have to be surgical masks, they don't have to be N95s, but just the mechanical barrier. And then just the basic things like cough etiquette, covering your mouth, using tissue, throwing the tissue away. That's important. But the tight, high-touch surfaces, I think, still need to be disinfected. And the virus is very susceptible to the usual disinfectants that are used in hospitals. Bleach solutions are effective for home use. So I think disinfection still is important for high-touch surfaces, but I agree with the CDC that respiratory transmission by far is still the most important. Of course, in the home setting, the family setting, it's kind of hard to separate out what might be the mode of transmission because you have respiratory contacts, high-touch surfaces that are shared, bathrooms, towels, those sorts of things.
Lieutenant Governor Green, when you talk about travel, I've actually heard infectious disease experts from the mainlands just say, I wouldn't get in a plane. Just like, do you think that is really going to be the main factor that influences how many tourists come here over a period of time? I mean, if you lifted the quarantine and you had measures that you've described, do you think there'd be a big snapback, or do you think this is going to be a while? And Victor, I'd like you to think about that too, that question.
I think there's likely to be a strong desire to travel to Hawaii, and it gives me pause. We absolutely need the economic benefit because we're worried about not having funds for our hospitals and our schools and so many things.
And food.
And food and every possible necessity. But I think there is a pent-up demand from some. Remember, you could have 90% of the population have no desire to travel at all, but a huge part of those remaining individuals wanting to go to a place in America because it is safer with a better healthcare system, to a place where we've had, relatively speaking, the lowest mortality rate and the lowest prevalence of the disease, so it's as safe as you can imagine. So I think there actually is going to be a high demand for us to come back, and I don't think it's just going to be like 6% of our tourists want to come back. I would predict, and we'll be able to assess this in the coming months, I'll predict 50, 60, or 70% numbers could be achieved if we had even remotely the capacity to trace and screen and so on. Because we have a universe of about 10 million people that historically would come. We're now right at about the halfway point of the year. So we would expect at max 5 million. There are 5 million people out there across the globe that will look at Hawaii and see it as an opportunity to travel to, which is why we have to be very, very responsible and ask them to travel with aloha, which is consideration for us. And I think if we go that extra mile and we have all of these things in place that Speaker Saiki and Senate President Kochi and teams have funded, we can control it and benefit. But we are going to be very vulnerable based on what our prevalence rate is.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anybody else in the panel get the willies when you talk about 5 million tourists between now and the end of the year? No. I mean, does that kind of scare you a little bit?
Yes, so that's where I think, one of our challenges going forward is how do we enforce these things? And I think generally that's why the United States has had such difficulty controlling this disease relative to Asian countries. But in Hawaii, again, do we have the infrastructure to enforce? And to what degree are we going to enforce? I mean, I walk around the hospital and tell people, put your mask on, or, you're sitting too close. But outside the hospital, that's even more difficult to enforce. I mean, who are you going to get? The police?
Well, that's exactly right. Because of that, I totally agree with Dr. Bello. Because we don't have the capacity to enforce large numbers of tourists, I mean, it won't be 5 million, but even if it's 2.5 million at half rate, we don't have that capacity to enforce at that level, which is the singular reason why having a clear plan to have them get a test before they come, and if they don't go through that process, have a multi-layered process to weed them out and get a test while they're here in the first hours or day, that would be our answer, because then it will be less important to be able to enforce very rigorously people out there, because we will at least have a standard understanding that they are very unlikely to be carrying that virus. We'll still have to be smart. We'll still have to trace and test and track people. But if we can achieve that standard, we won't have to worry about chasing large numbers of people that are misbehaving. And we've seen, even just with 300 to 500 travelers in a given day, that's very challenging for the police department.
I want to shift to Victor Lim, because, Victor, I think that while you hear all of this caution out there, you're like, what is the effect, speaking for the Restaurant Association, how much longer, I mean, how many colleagues are you going to lose, businesses are you going to lose, if it takes 3-4 months? How long do you think they'll survive?
To me, realistically, I think it might be at least a year for us to be like about 60-80% of where we are today, 2 months ago. because it's going to take a little while for people to get comfortable to come. And we're unique because, we're surrounded by water and things like that. So we can learn from places like New Zealand and Taiwan. I thought Taiwan did a fabulous job in terms of all the things that they used to do. I mean, they tag everybody's smartphones. When you get to the country, they can track you. They know exactly where you are at, and they're very aggressive in terms of testing and making sure. And the people that needs to be quarantined should be quarantined, because otherwise it's gonna kill our lifeblood. And the sooner we're able to do all of that stuff, I think we got to bring life back to normal, because when you hear things like Liki Drive-In at about 70 years of business, third generation family, and all of a sudden they said we gave up, and that's a big one. There's a lot of small ones that are just close, right now, that will never come back.
Speaker Saiki, I think that there's always a push and pull between business and a lot of other, pressures out there. In the committee that you were running, what was your impression of the business community's attitude toward how long we can wait? Are they willing to wait for these structures to be in place, or would they like to see just a lifting the curtain already?
Well, for the most part, the members of our committee from the business sector and private sector are cautious. They know that that health and safety protocols have to be put into place before we begin to reopen the state, and they don't want to rush those decisions. At the same time, they want to make sure that the state is helping to coordinate the reopening with the proper public health standards. I think that that the Lieutenant Governor made a really good point when he talked about pre-testing at airports. I think when you look at tourism, and obviously tourism will have to reopen in order for us to restart Hawaii, and tourism needs to reopen incrementally, and it has to open safely. And I feel like we kind of have the luxury of using this opportunity to kind of cherry pick destinations where we want to allow an exchange of tourists. I think we should consider things like, for example, maybe having an agreement with Japan, with the Japan government, with the airports in Japan, on testing protocols at their airports and our airports, and allowing for some travel between these two destinations. We have an opportunity to kind of restructure our tourism strategy.
Dr. Bello, short of a vaccine or some other high level of immunity in the community, what kind of structure do you think needs to be in place? How robust a structure do you think needs to be on island? And what are the most important factors that you see that would allow tourists to start coming back in? Like, do you agree, for example, that it's worthwhile to have them tested before they come as a requirement?
Yeah, so that would be ideal. But, again, I think you need to be clear about what test. So we've been talking about testing generically. I think sometimes we when we say test, we mean the swab test of the nose, which is really for acute infection. And then there's the antibody, the blood test. So that was what I was referring to for seroprevalence, to see how many people have been exposed. And I think we should be clear that the positive antibody test does not mean that you're immune. So you can't take the test, get a positive result, and say, I don't need to be quarantined, or I don't need to wear my mask, or I'm not infectious to other people. So I think there's still a lot of confusion about that. But I think early on, what we did suffer from was the lack of swab nucleic acid testing for acute infection. So we could not get testing for people who had symptoms readily. I think that's good now. But it has to be, again, strategically employed. And I agree with testing tourists. In fact, we may have to do serial testing of tourists who come in. You know, maybe
what do you
every.
mean? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the testing, as Josh Green said, is like what you are at that moment for acute disease. So you could be, again, very early in infection and be negative.
Yes.
Where 3 days later, you could be positive and still not be symptomatic.
Doctor, I wanted to ask, because I so appreciate getting to sit across from Dr. Bello. Of course, Victor and I are old friends, but I've been wondering, what do you feel, forgive me for playing moderator here, what
You did it last time, too. I don't care. It's fine.
Watch out, Daryl. Watch out, Daryl.
Yes. What are you feeling about, we're hearing about new tests constantly, right? And we're hearing about swab tests out of Yale and other places. Do you feel that some of these less invasive tests can be added to our arsenal, whether it's at the airport or serial testing of tourists? Because if we can arm ourselves with those devices, I think then we can protect the business industry and augment what the legislature has been supporting. Is it possible? Is it coming to us?
Well, I think it seems like every week there's a new test. So in addition to the nucleic acid tests now, there are now antigen tests that test for proteins on the viral spike proteins. But, you know, all of these tests are, as you know, not FDA approved. In fact, we don't even talk about the FDA approval process anymore. It's the EUA status. And so I think it's really important for all of these new tests, for the local commercial labs, for DOH, to validate these tests internally to make sure that they work. That they actually work in their individual labs. And, you know, the 15-minute Abbott test, which everybody thought was going to be a lifesaver, is kind of hung up now because there look like there's some difficulties. And I think that even the FDA has put kind of a hold on that and said, you know, let's look at the reproducibility of that test result. So we have to be cautious, but again, I really feel that some form of serial testing is the way we go because we have such a vulnerable population.
When you see a great test, please tell all of us really fast because we want it. We
may have to use some of these less than ideal tests in the interim. But I think
while we're making all of these tests, in the meantime, you know, we're dying. Okay, we got to open up our inter-island, at least interstate commerce, so that as a first step, because you cannot continue to have the businesses bleed until, you know, the world is perfect. You know, I do understand very clearly that out-of-state travel is our big exposure. It's I don't want it here just as much as anybody else. But if you look at our counties of where we are at, we have to bring life back to normalcy. At least we have some commerce, some people getting their jobs back, things like that. And then we can work on all these other things. So, you know, I love all the tests. I watch the news every day. I even follow his Instagram, you know, to see what's happening. But the thing is, we have to get a certain amount of life normalcy back.
So let me ask Speaker Saiki, one of the questions I got, what is the legislature doing to help unemployed and small businesses? The unemployment thing is very depressing. You had a big debate at the legislature. You had people literally in tears, legislators in tears saying, we have people who are in food lines, you know, which we've never seen in our lifetimes. So we could talk about opening up inter-island travel, but if people don't have money, they're not going to travel. What do you see leadership doing in this interim period before you could be fully open to tourism to get the economy going, at least jumpstart things?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is on unemployment. about 6 weeks ago, Representative Sylvia Luke, Representative Aaron Johansson, and I went to visit the unemployment office on Punchbowl Street. And that was on a Wednesday afternoon. And when we got there, we realized that there were only 50 workers who were processing unemployment applications. As a result of that meeting, we worked over that weekend to help the Labor Department set up the Unemployment Intake Center at the Convention Center. So you now have 210 workstations at the Convention Center. We have 210 volunteers processing applications. I know that there are a lot of people who are still waiting for the applications to be processed. We are very aware of the circumstances that they are facing. But with the creation of the intake center, we are now have processed about 73% of the applications that were submitted. So I feel like we have made a dent in the number of applications that have been processed and are being paid to people. Today, as I mentioned earlier, we approved legislation that provided funding to the counties. And when the federal government passed the CARES Act, they provided for a $1.25 billion lump sum appropriation to the state of Hawaii. About $387 million of that went to the city and county of Honolulu based on the federal formula. And but the neighbor island counties did not receive, were not entitled to a share of that lump sum amount based on the federal law. But
Speaker, can I ask Speaker more directly though? Don't you have an almost impossible balance here? Is that you don't want to raise taxes, but at the same time, you've got apparently the unemployment. I heard this today. The unemployment benefits that people are getting are going to be taxable, so they're going to have to pay income tax back to the government on this. I don't know that a lot of people think that makes sense, but are there things you can do? One, to reduce the burden on people, on businesses, and at the same time maintain a level of services without starting to carve down the size of state government or raise taxes?
Well, so what I was going to explain was that by providing grants to the neighbor islands, and this is about $174 million worth of funds, we are working with the counties, with the neighboring counties, to provide services to families and to businesses. So what you're going to see is at the county level, you will see more funds become available for food, for housing, for business relief. Honolulu has already announced a program to provide loans to small businesses. We wanted to share a portion of our federal funds with the counties because we knew that they would be able to expedite services and programs for those on their islands.
But Speaker, let me just ask this even more pointedly, and I've done this to the governor's office a few times, so I'm going to do it to you. It just seems like the money is going to run out unless something happens. And I'm wondering, what do you think that something has to be?
Well, it has to be the reopening of the economy. There has to be an incremental reopening because we have to generate business activity in our state, obviously. And the prime generator will be tourism. But having said that, we know that we have to be very smart and strategic in how we do this. We cannot risk the public's health and safety, because if we do risk it and you suddenly see surges in our community, then we will lose a lot of ground in having to reopen the economy again.
I know Lieutenant Green wants to jump in.
I would echo what Scott said. Look, when he mentioned the bubble, which we often say a bubble with Japan represents 20% of all the travelers, the bodies, the people that come to Hawaii, but 30% of all the revenues, and 50% of all the people that come to Honolulu, where we are better equipped with the capacity to test at the airport and make things safe. So that is the ultimate answer, which is to bring dollars back into the state of Hawaii, though safely. That's why I keep sounding fixated on making sure that we have a mechanism to make sure people come in not hot. In other words, tested and negative. Because if they come in that way, we mitigate the risk. We mitigate the giant risk, in fact, of shutting down again. We shut down again, we are finished. We can't afford that. So what Speaker Saiki is saying is right. We have to open up tourism. So here's the answer. We open up inter-island travel on June 1st, plus or minus a day, because we have our processes in place. That's smart. There's no risk. We open up travel to certain areas from the mainland on July 1st, plus or minus a couple days, because we've had our protocols in place, and we bring revenue in safely. Now, that may freak people out at the moment, but you're going to have to open at some point, so you might as well do it with the precautions in place. You then start seeing revenue, you start seeing businesses and restaurants perk up, and you go down. We've gotten up to about 23% unemployment. You start chopping that down so you don't have the same pressures to pay out these dollars in the form of unemployment payments, which are taxable. So the answer is to get off our butts and to do that. And so please, everybody, when we speak with the Attorney General and Department of Health and everything, we have to go the extra mile like the Legislative Committee did to get people's unemployment checks out. Got now up to 174,000 people have got their checks. We have to go the extra mile to bring in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tourists safely with negative tests so that we can get going. It's not rocket science.
Let me ask, though, and I want to give this question to Dr. Bello, is Kenneth Hara, the incident commander the other day, put it this way in front of one of the committees. He said, we have to accept a certain level of risk. Now, the healthcare system has built up considerably, so you have capacity to respond to those outbreaks,
yes,
the embers or fires or whatever President Trump calls them. But, you know, what's an acceptable level of risk? No matter how much stuff you put at the airport, people are going to come in. So I'm just, Dr. Bello, to you, what's an acceptable level of risk? Do you think it would be okay if we hit a steady state of 200 or 300 cases a month or some level? I mean, can we handle that, or is it 15 or 20 cases a month? Where is that?
Yeah, so I don't know what the magic number is. So at Queens, you know, we've looked at our surge capacity. We've tried to parallel with the state's plan of what we would do if there were X number of cases versus Y number of cases versus Z number of cases. We're putting together some what we hope are early predictors of the disease coming back. You know, stuff like influenza-like illness surveillance. We plan to tap into the Department of Health's program, but also develop some of our own parameters for our ambulatory, sites. So, but what's the magic number? What's the magic risk? I don't think anybody knows that.
Do you start, though, with what your capability is
physically
and then work
we've
backwards?
looked at that. We've looked at that, what our ICU capacity is, what our ventilator capacity is. So we can probably handle a moderate surge. We probably could not handle an overwhelming surge. And I think, again, and what the number is for those cases, I don't know. So it also has something to do not with necessarily the absolute number, but the rate. And it goes back to the flattening of the curve. So if you can get a lower rate of rise as opposed to everybody getting sick at once, that's the desirable pattern.
Well, Daryl, here's where we are today, right? Okay, look, we got 39% of our ICU beds taken. Our hospital beds are at 50% and our ventilators at 9%. So we have the capacity. And we only will know that we don't have people here sick with the virus if we test them. You test them, you know. And that will be one part of many. But we're fools if we don't do it. We're taking a risk with our system if we don't do it because there are a lot of unknowns here, and we can't wait any longer for the economy. So we have no choice, and people will realize that in the near future. It will be a blended system, but we have to do it as the summer comes around, and then we can always dampen down things if we have any threats to our healthcare system, but we have little choice now because we're missing big events. My Hanai family celebrated their 65th anniversary today. The Ising family, I love those guys, but we're not together because of this. People have lost loved ones to suicide. We've lost loved ones through other terrible moments. So we have to open up, but we'll do it safely. We want to celebrate life again, and right now we have a low rate, so this is the time to get going.
I think that there's a tremendous potential, especially on the West Coast. In the next 2 months, their temperature is going to go up to 100 plus degrees, and they usually like to come and lie down by Ritz-Carlton or something like that, and there's a lot of people that want to do that.
Great.
So I think when Phoenix, it's just a
Mr. Lim, I have to stop you. I see what you're saying. Potential. Before we go, if you're looking for information on COVID-19, and maybe I should go look for some since I'm about to cough again, please go to our website at pbshawaii.org. Mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight, and we thank our guests in studio, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, Victor Lim, who owns several McDonald's restaurants in Hawaii, Dr. Elaine Bello, an infectious disease specialist, and via the internet, House Speaker Scott Saiki. Next week on a special 90-minute episode of Insights, we focus on tourism, how it might be reopened, and about its future, as Hawaii has a rare opportunity to shape what the industry should be. Please join us then. I'm Darrell Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.